Sana sat by the window of their lavish villa, one hand gently resting on her rounded belly, the other clutching a cup of herbal tea she no longer enjoyed. At 8 months pregnant, she should have felt excitement, hope, and comfort. But all she felt now was a dull ache of confusion and fear, gnawing at her from the inside, far more painful than any physical symptom she'd endured. She used to believe her life was a fairy tale. Just a year ago, she had been swept off her feet by Rayyan Malik, a man who seemed to embody everything she had ever wanted. Handsome, articulate, and successful, Rayyan had confidence that drew people in effortlessly. His dark eyes sparkled with ambition, and he carried himself like someone who owned the world, and maybe, at one time, he did. Their first meeting had been straight out of a movie. Sana was working as a freelance interior designer when she was hired to consult for one of Rayyan's newly purchased properties. He'd strolled into the construction site wearing a crisp navy suit, far too polished for the dusty surroundings, and yet he'd looked entirely in place. He'd smiled at her, extended his hand, and said, "A beautiful space needs a beautiful mind to design it. I hope I've found both." They married just 3 months later in a glittering ceremony at a beach resort in Karachi, with hundreds in attendance. Rayyan had spared no expense: designer outfits, floral ceilings, even a string quartet flown in from abroad. Everyone envied Sana. Her friends called her lucky. Her family beamed with pride. And Sana? She was in love. Or at least, she thought she was. The early days of their marriage were golden. Rayyan took her on spontaneous weekend trips to Dubai, left handwritten love notes on her vanity mirror, and cooked breakfast for her on lazy Sundays. When they found out she was pregnant, he lifted her off the ground in a spinning hug, whispering that this baby was the beginning of their forever. But forever, it seemed, had a time limit. It started subtly: an increase in late-night meetings, whispered phone calls he'd step outside to take, and unannounced trips out of town. At first, Sana brushed it off. Business was business. Rayyan had warned her early on that the corporate world demanded sacrifices. But the sacrifices, she realized, were all hers. Soon, he started locking his office, hiding his phone with a password, and even changing the combination on their shared safe without telling her. When she gently questioned him about it, he would laugh it off. "You're just hormonal, Jan. Don't stress the baby with silly thoughts," he'd say with a dismissive kiss on her forehead. But the kiss no longer felt loving, it felt like a tactic to quiet her. As her due date approached, things only got worse. She noticed large sums of money missing from their joint account, amounts too significant to ignore. When she asked, Rayyan gave vague answers. Investments, deals, opportunities. Never specifics. Once, while organizing laundry, she found a torn receipt hidden in his jacket pocket, a cash transfer made at midnight to an unfamiliar name in a remote area she had never heard of. Worse still were the hushed phone calls. Rayyan would retreat to the balcony late at night, speaking in urgent whispers, often switching languages mid-sentence. Once, when she quietly followed to eavesdrop, she caught only fragments. "She doesn't know anything yet, just a few more days." Sana's heart began to pound constantly at every footstep, every closing door, every time Rayyan's car pulled into the driveway. She stopped sleeping properly, plagued by anxiety and doubt. She tried to confide in her mother, but Rayyan always managed to be charming when family visited, making her concerns seem paranoid. The man who had once promised to protect her now made her feel like a prisoner. Her freedom, her voice, even her identity felt like they were slipping away one shadow at a time. One afternoon, she found her hospital bag, the one she had packed weeks ago for delivery, moved from the bedroom closet to the garage, behind a stack of dusty boxes. She hadn't placed it there. When she asked Rayyan about it, he claimed ignorance and brushed her off. But something in his tone, cold and final, sent shivers down her spine. It was then that she felt her baby kick sharp and strong, as if sensing her fear. Sana cradled her belly, whispering softly, "Don't worry, Janu. Mama's here. Mama won't let anything happen to you." But deep down, she didn't know if that was true anymore. "Sana, I have a surprise for you," Rayyan said one morning, a soft smile playing on his lips. He placed a hand on her belly, his touch unusually tender. "You've been stressed. I want to take you somewhere quiet. Just you, me, and our baby. The sudden sweetness in his tone sent an odd chill through Sana, but she nodded hesitantly. After weeks of coldness, this affection felt almost foreign. A part of her wanted to believe it was real. Maybe he was trying. Maybe he had noticed her slipping away and wanted to fix things. Maybe there was still hope. He packed an overnight bag for her, helped her into the car, and played her favorite songs on the drive. The windows were rolled down just enough to let the breeze touch her face, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe they were healing. But that hope slowly began to rot when they turned off the highway and onto a bumpy dirt road. "Where are we going?" Sana asked, gripping the seatbelt as the car rattled over stones and potholes. "It's a little unconventional," Rayyan replied, eyes fixed on the road. "But I promise it's peaceful. Away from everything." She didn't ask more. Her instincts whispered that something was wrong, but her heart, worn and exhausted, clung to the possibility that this was still about love. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to an old, rusted warehouse on the edge of what looked like an abandoned industrial district. The building stood like a forgotten corpse, peeling paint, broken windows, and silence so thick it choked the air. There were no signs of life anywhere. "Rayyan, what is this?" Sana's voice trembled. He got out of the car and walked around to open her door. "Come on. Trust me. Trust." That word no longer meant anything. Still, she followed him slowly, her swollen belly making each step careful and deliberate. He pushed open the heavy warehouse door with a loud groan of metal, revealing a hollow, dusty interior that reeked of mildew, oil, and something worse, something rotting. She stepped inside hesitantly, wrapping her arms around herself. The air was stale, and the dim sunlight that filtered through the broken ceiling panels made the shadows look alive. "I don't understand," she said softly. "What are we doing here?" Rayyan's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The smile faded. The warmth in his eyes turned icy. "We're doing nothing," he said, shutting the door behind them with a loud clang. "You, on the other hand, are staying." Panic surged in Sana's chest. "What? Rayyan, what are you saying?" He walked closer, his voice low and void of emotion. "You've been watching too closely. Asking too many questions. Looking where you shouldn't." Her mouth went dry. I don't understand." "Yes, you do," he cut in sharply. "You know what I've been doing. And that makes you dangerous." Sana stumbled backward, clutching her stomach protectively. "I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." Rayyan scoffed. "That was your choice. And now, you're a liability. I can't afford liabilities." He turned and walked toward the exit. "Rayyan, please," she cried. "You can't leave me here, please, I'm scared." He paused at the door. "Don't bother screaming. No one's around for miles." And with that, he stepped out, slamming the heavy steel door shut. A second later, she heard the unmistakable sound of a bolt sliding into place. Locked. Sana ran to the door, pounding on it with both fists. "Rayyan, please, open the door." "Rayyan." Only silence answered her. Her breaths grew rapid. The warehouse suddenly felt darker, colder. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed movement in the corners. Skittering. Small shadows darting between crates and piles of garbage. Then she heard it, the unmistakable squeak of rats. She staggered backward, tears blurring her vision. Rats. Everywhere. Crawling out of holes in the wall. Peeking from behind barrels. The ground rustled with them. Sana sank to the floor, wrapping her arms tightly around her stomach, her body shaking with sobs. Her baby kicked in protest at her panic. "I'm sorry," she whispered, rocking herself. "I'm so sorry." But no one heard her. No one even knew where she was. Except Rayyan. Miles away from the warehouse where Sana lay imprisoned, a different kind of battle was being fought. FBI agent Zara Malik sat in her cluttered office in the Karachi Bureau's Special Investigations Unit, poring over the web of data she had been collecting for over 7 months. Her coffee had gone cold, but she barely noticed. Every pin on her corkboard, every red thread and scribbled sticky note, pointed back to one name, Rayyan Malik. On the surface, Rayyan appeared to be a successful real estate developer and businessman, known for his generous donations to charity and elite connections in political circles. But Zara had learned long ago that the cleanest suits often concealed the dirtiest secrets. A few whispers from informants, a pattern of financial irregularities, and 2 missing persons cases had led her down a deep, dangerous path, one that Rayyan had walked confidently, assuming no one would dare follow. But Zara wasn't just anyone. She had joined the bureau after her own cousin had vanished under similar circumstances, never to be found. She had promised herself she would fight for the victims who couldn't speak and shine light on the people who thrived in darkness. Rayyan Malik was no longer just a case file to her, he was the monster behind the mask. And today, she had her first real break. The surveillance team monitoring Rayyan's private communications had intercepted a phone call placed late last night. It had been short, muffled, and spoken in a blend of coded language and Urdu. But one phrase had pierced through loud and clear. "I've cleared out the mess. She won't be a problem anymore." Zara froze when she heard the recording. Her instincts screamed that he wasn't talking about evidence, he was talking about someone. A woman. Maybe a witness. Maybe his wife. She immediately pulled up Rayyan's phone GPS history. He had driven out of the city early that morning, far from any of his known properties or development sites. The pin showed a remote industrial district, one long since abandoned after a textile factory shut down years ago. No legal holdings, no known associates out there. Just an old warehouse. Zara's heart pounded. She called her team. "I want eyes on that location immediately. We're going in." Meanwhile, back in the warehouse, Sana lay curled in a dusty corner, her body trembling from more than fear now. Hours had passed. Maybe a full day. Time didn't feel real anymore. The only constants were the darkness, the rats, and the relentless hunger gnawing at her insides. Her throat was parched, her limbs sore, and her belly heavy with pain. She had tried screaming until her voice gave out. She had pounded the door until her knuckles bled. Nothing. No one. Now, her body was starting to betray her. The cramps that had started slowly had grown sharp and more frequent. Every few minutes, a wave of pain crashed through her abdomen like a storm breaking against rocks. Her breathing became erratic. Sweat soaked her hairline despite the cold. She knew what was happening. She was going into labor. She thought she heard footsteps. Or maybe she was hallucinating again, just like when she thought she saw her mother standing in the shadows, reaching out to her. But no, this time, she heard the distinct sound of a metal latch being tampered with. Heavy boots. A commanding voice barking orders. Her head lolled to the side as her eyes fluttered open. The door was vibrating now. Then, boom. With a metallic scream, the door was blown open, and beams of light flooded into the warehouse like sunlight crashing into a tomb. "FBI," a voice yelled. "Hands where I can see them." Zara stepped in, sweeping the room with her flashlight until it landed on the small, slumped figure in the corner. "Oh my God," she whispered. "We've got a live one." She rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside Sana, who stared at her in disbelief, barely able to keep her eyes open. "Help, my baby," Sana croaked, before collapsing into Zara's arms. "Medic." Zara screamed. "She's in active labor. We need a medic now." The agents moved swiftly, calling for an ambulance as they began stabilizing Sana. Her vitals were dangerously low, and the baby's condition was unknown. But she was still breathing. Still alive. As the paramedics wheeled her out into the night, Zara walked beside the gurney, her hand resting gently on Sana's. "You're safe now," she whispered. "We've got you. He won't hurt you again." And for the first time in days, Sana believed it. Sana could no longer feel the pain, just the weight of it. The darkness pressing down on her chest, the spinning in her head, the warmth of blood pooling beneath her. Her body trembled with exhaustion, her muscles sore and torn from hours of labor that had gone unanswered. Her baby wasn't moving anymore. That terrified her more than the rats, more than the cold, more than death itself. She let her head fall back against the wall. Her lips parted to whisper one final plea, a fragile breath in the emptiness. "Please, someone." And then, boom. The door exploded open, crashing against the wall with a thunderous metal clang. The sudden flood of light nearly blinded her. Dozens of flashlights cut through the darkness like swords. Voices filled the room, shouts, commands, urgent cries. The warehouse, once dead with silence, was now alive with footsteps and gasps. Sana tried to turn her head, but her body wouldn't move. Over here, a voice shouted. We've got her. She's alive. Agent Zara Malik was the first to reach her. The beam from her flashlight landed on the figure crumpled against the far wall, blooded, pale, eyes barely open. For a heartbeat, Zara couldn't move. It was worse than she imagined. Sana looked like a dying ghost. Zara dropped to her knees beside her and gently touched her shoulder. Sana. My name is Zara. You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here, okay? Sana blinked, her dry lips twitching into the faintest movement. Her hands trembled as they clutched her belly. My baby, please. Zara's heart clenched. I know. I've got you both. She didn't wait for the medics, she lifted Sana herself, cradling the fragile woman in her arms like a broken porcelain doll. Blood soaked through Zara's shirt, but she didn't care. Sana's breath was shallow, her eyes fluttering shut again. She's going into shock, one of the agents called. Ambulance is 3 minutes out. We don't have 3 minutes, Zara snapped. Get the med kit. Start vitals. Now. As they laid Sana down gently on a stretcher and strapped her in, Zara held her hand tightly, whispering, stay with me. Don't give up now. Your baby needs you. You're almost there. The sound of sirens cut through the night air as the ambulance arrived. Within moments, Sana was wheeled inside, a paramedic immediately placing a fetal heart monitor on her swollen belly. Everyone froze. There was a beat. Then another. Then a faint thump. Weak. Sluggish. But there. The heartbeat's there, but fading fast, the paramedic said grimly. We're losing both if we don't move now. Zara climbed into the back of the ambulance without hesitation, never letting go of Sana's hand. The vehicle tore through the streets, siren wailing as they raced against fate itself. At the hospital, chaos awaited. Doctors and nurses were already prepped in the trauma bay. As soon as the ambulance doors flung open, Sana was pulled out and rushed through swinging double doors. A nurse quickly briefed the OB/GYN team. Pregnant female, 32 weeks. Unknown time in labor. Dehydration, blood loss, fetal distress. Emergency C-section needed immediately. Zara stood outside the operating room, her heart pounding as if it were her own child on the table. She pressed her hand against the glass, watching as the doctors worked with frantic precision. One nurse held Sana's limp hand, another monitored the baby's oxygen levels. Inside, the attending surgeon gave orders in rapid succession. Scalpel. Suction. We have to move, baby's heart rate is dropping. The incision was made. Blood pooled, and clamps were applied quickly. Sana didn't move. She lay there, motionless, barely clinging to life. Machines beeped. A code cart was rolled closer. Almost there, cords wrapped around the neck. Cut it. Clear the airway. Come on, breathe. Zara turned away, unable to watch anymore. She paced the hall like a caged tiger, praying harder than she ever had in her life. She thought of Sana's eyes, her desperate whisper. The way she had held her belly with more love than fear, even while bleeding and alone. Then a cry. Soft, raspy, but real. Zara froze. The nurse came out a moment later, breathless but smiling. The baby's out. Breathing. She's a fighter. Zara's knees buckled slightly with relief. And Sana? She's hanging on. Still critical, but stable for now. Zara leaned against the wall and let herself breathe. Later that night, when the danger had passed and both Sana and her newborn daughter were in recovery, Zara stepped into the quiet room. Sana was asleep, pale but peaceful. In the small bassinet beside her, the baby slept with a nasal cannula and a soft pink blanket. Zara reached out and gently brushed the baby's cheek. You made it, she whispered. Both of you did. And in that moment, surrounded by beeping monitors and the faint scent of antiseptic and new life, the warehouse, the rats, the pain, the betrayal felt like a distant nightmare. They had broken the door in time. But more importantly, Sana had survived it. The first thing Sana felt was warmth. Soft, clean sheets hugged her body, and a low rhythmic beeping pulsed nearby. Her eyelids fluttered open slowly, blinking against the fluorescent hospital lights above. Her body ached all over, sore, stitched, drained, but it was different from before. She wasn't cold. She wasn't surrounded by rats. She wasn't in the dark anymore. She was alive. Sana, a gentle voice whispered. She turned her head slightly, and there she was, Agent Zara Malik, sitting at her bedside, dark circles under her eyes but a softness in her expression that Sana hadn't seen before. "You're safe now," Zara said, offering a reassuring smile. "You're in the hospital. You've been unconscious for a day." Sana's lips parted, dry and cracked. "The baby," she croaked, panic flaring again. "Where's my baby?" Zara stood immediately and motioned to the nurse, who approached with a kind nod. "She's alive," the nurse said gently, placing a hand on Sana's shoulder. "Your little girl is in the NICU. She's small, but she's strong. She's breathing on her own now. The dam broke." Sana sobbed, shoulders shaking, breath catching, tears streaming down her cheeks as relief crashed through her in waves. Her hands instinctively reached for her belly, now soft and flat beneath the blanket. The life she had carried through so much suffering had made it. Zara leaned forward and took her hand. "You saved her, Sana. You fought harder than most people ever will. That baby, she's a miracle." Sana clung to Zara's hand like a lifeline, her words broken by sobs. "Thank you, you found me, you didn't give up." "I never planned to," Zara replied. "And I never will." A moment of quiet passed between them before Zara added, her voice turning firm, "Rayyan will face justice. We have all the evidence we need. He's in custody. And with your testimony, he won't walk away from this." Sana didn't respond right away. Her body was exhausted, her mind still tangled in trauma, but her heart, the part of her that had almost given up, felt light for the first time in weeks. She looked at Zara, her eyes glassy. "I thought I was going to die in that place. I thought she was going to die with me." "You didn't," Zara said softly. "You both survived. And now the world will know your story." The next morning, the news broke like wildfire. Pregnant woman locked in warehouse rescued by FBI agent. Husband arrested in shocking abandonment case involving pregnant wife. FBI hero agent saves woman and unborn baby from near-death horror. Every major news outlet picked up the story. Images of the warehouse flashed across television screens. Journalists repeated the chilling details, how Sana had been left in a rat-infested building, in labor, to die. How she had been found just minutes before her death. How the baby had survived against all odds. In the NICU, behind a glass wall, Sana sat in a wheelchair with Zara beside her. Inside the incubator, her daughter lay wrapped in tiny blankets, a small oxygen tube in her nose, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. "She's beautiful," Zara said quietly. "She's a warrior," Sana replied, wiping away a tear. "Like her savior." Zara gave a soft laugh. "Like her mother." And as they sat there together, two women bound by fate, by fire, by survival, Sana knew one thing for certain. Her nightmare was over. And her daughter's life was just beginning. Rayyan Malik's world collapsed before he had time to realize it. 3 days after abandoning his wife in a warehouse and leaving her for dead, he had tried to board a private charter flight from Karachi to Istanbul under a false name. He wore dark sunglasses, carried a forged passport, and thought his wealth and influence could still buy him freedom. But what he didn't know was that FBI agent Zara Malik had already frozen his accounts, blacklisted his passport, and placed his name on every no-fly list from Pakistan to Europe. As he stepped onto the tarmac, a swarm of armed agents surrounded the aircraft. Rayyan's face turned from smug to stunned as he was pushed to the ground, wrists zip-tied, and read his rights. "No more running, Mr. Malik," Zara said coldly, standing over him. "Your empire ends today." The trial began a month later, and the courtroom was packed. The media dubbed it the warehouse case, and the public was horrified by the details how a respected businessman had hidden a second life of fraud, corruption, and cruelty. But nothing shocked them more than how he had discarded his own pregnant wife as if she were worthless. Zara sat near the prosecution team, watching every move, every motion. She had worked tirelessly with investigators to gather everything: financial statements, phone logs, wiretap transcripts, and photographs of the warehouse. But the most powerful piece of evidence came from Sana herself. Dressed simply in a pale blue shalwar kameez, Sana took the stand with her head held high and her baby's birth bracelet wrapped around her wrist. The courtroom went still as she recounted what Rayyan had done, how he had smiled while locking her in, how she had screamed until her voice gave out, how she had gone into labor in a filthy corner, convinced she and her child were going to die. She never shed a tear while testifying. Her voice was steady, clear. She was all I could think about, Sana said, one hand over her heart. Not me. Just her. I didn't want her to die knowing no one tried to save her. Rayyan sat stone-faced across the room. No guilt. No apology. When asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he simply shrugged and said, "I did what I had to." The judge stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Malik," she said sharply, "you not only committed financial crimes and obstructed justice, you left your pregnant wife to die like an animal. You showed no remorse and no humanity. This court finds you guilty on all counts." She paused before delivering the final blow. "You are hereby sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole." Rayyan blinked but said nothing as the guards led him away. There were no appeals. No sympathizers. Just the echo of a gavel that ended his reign. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as Zara and Sana emerged side by side. Reporters swarmed them with questions, but Zara only said one thing. Justice was served today not just for Sana, but for every woman whose voice was ignored. Weeks passed. Rayyan's name disappeared from headlines, replaced by stories of the woman and the agent who refused to give up. Sana's baby girl was gaining strength, slowly being weaned off oxygen. She had thick black hair and a soft cry that melted every nurse's heart. One afternoon, Zara visited Sana at the recovery center, flowers in hand, files in her bag, and something gentler in her smile. "You're looking stronger," she said, settling onto the chair beside her. Sana nodded. "Some days are harder than others. But I'm here. And she's here. That's all that matters now." They sat in silence for a while, watching the baby sleep. "You know," Zara said eventually, "I've worked dozens of cases. Seen terrible things. But I've never seen anyone fight the way you did. You didn't just survive. You saved her." Sana reached out and squeezed her hand. "I think you saved us both." For Zara, that moment meant more than any promotion, but when she returned to the bureau a few days later, a surprise awaited her: a commendation letter, a framed certificate, and a promotion to senior field agent for victim recovery and advocacy. But the real reward, she knew, was back at the hospital, wrapped in pink blankets and sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. It had been 6 months since Sana emerged from the warehouse that nearly became her grave. 6 months since she stared death in the face and chose to live not just for herself, but for the tiny heartbeat that had kept her grounded through the darkest hours of her life. Now, the nightmare lived only in memories and on the pages of her journal. Sana sat on the veranda of her small, sunlit cottage in the north, nestled safely within a victim protection program run in collaboration with federal services and private sponsors. The home was modest but peaceful, surrounded by trees that whispered in the breeze and fields of wildflowers that danced in the afternoon sun. Here, she wasn't the woman from the headlines. She wasn't the warehouse victim. She was just Sana, a mother, a survivor, and something more she never thought she'd be again, whole. Inside, the sound of giggles broke through her thoughts. Her daughter, now chubby and curious, clapped her hands as her stuffed toy danced in front of her. Her hair had grown thick and dark, curling slightly at the tips like Sana's mother's had. Her lungs, once fragile, now burst with laughter. Sana picked up her pen again, turning to the last page of the notebook on her lap.